All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Yep, bye-bye. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Oh, sorry, I'm a little late. I had a little, I don't actually own the account, so
Oh,
I got the two-factor verification thing, and so I had to like track down the owner of the account. So it was a little, and I had the Zoom up all day just to avoid that, but whatever. Life happens, right?
yep. Yeah, it kept telling me to open Zoom Workplace and install it on my computer, and I've had it on my computer for years. So,
Well, I think the platform keeps changing.
yes.
I saw Seth, so that's good. Hey, Seth.
How are you, Tor?
I'm good now that I'm in. I was a
Always a
little
little
panicked for a
little touch
minute
and
there.
go, right? Yeah,
Yes.
always a little bit
Thank
tenuous
goodness.
with
Thank goodness Colleen was available.
oh, that's a WFOP mantra right there. Thank
Yeah.
goodness Colleen was available.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Okay, I think I've let everybody in,
Oh my goodness.
and we'll just maybe give people a few more minutes. I'm going to check my email, make sure nobody has having troubles. No, I don't see anybody, so a few more people are trickling in. We'll give it maybe a couple more minutes.
Hey, hey, I'm hungry. Mm, mm.
Yep, a few more people filtering in. I figure we'll give it to 7:02, Seth, and then we can kick off.
Sure, that sounds good. I,
And then I'll
this is
just keep admitting people as they go.
this is something to do with when I initially set up all my stuff at UW Whitewater, but my name is always in all caps. I'm always shouting my name on things. My students, and then I'll be on my roster, Seth Copeland. It's always, I don't know what I did wrong to begin with.
That's funny.
Look at all these
I
folks
think
here.
you can change the display because I've had to
Probably
do that.
could.
I think because sometimes the WFOP Zoom shows up when I'm on a personal Zoom and I have to like overtype it.
Mm. I had a student conference with me once at UWM, and I assume she used Zoom to talk to her friends normally because when she initially logged in, her name was the C word.
Oh
And
no.
it quickly changed, and I saw from her face like she was kind of like, did he notice? I gave no indication that I did, and we didn't even address it because what do you say at that point?
Right.
I
Yeah.
found it rather amusing, but I was just like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Better to ignore something like
Oh
that, probably.
my.
Yes.
Oh
Okay.
dear.
I'm gonna let Anne in, and then I think we can maybe get going.
All
I'm just gonna introduce or start with some housekeeping things, and then I think I'll let you introduce yourself because I think your bio is longer than you like lead your your experience is deeper than your bio sometimes implies. So I'm gonna let you talk about your history. Okay, so this is Seth Copeland, and we are doing a docu-poetry workshop tonight. And I would just ask everybody to be mindful of their background noise and mute themselves when they're not talking, just so it's a little more clear for everybody else. And then we are recording, so be mindful of that. And then I'm gonna kick it off to Seth. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Tori. It's a real pleasure to get to do this. I want to thank the WFOP for hosting this, and this is going to be fun. I hope. I will be. We'll have a good time. It's all about positive mental attitude. By way of introduction, I'm Dr. Seth Copeland. You do not have to call me Dr. Seth Copeland, but it was very expensive, so I call myself that. I'm currently teaching at UW Whitewater. I'm originally from Southwest Oklahoma. I've edited an online poetry magazine for, well, it'll be 10 years this April. Very excited about that. Going to do our 30th issue. It's called Petrichor. You'll be seeing a little bit of that today, and that's not to brag on me because it's other people's work. And I am a poet. I've written quite a bit. I've been in magazines. Some you've heard of, some are long since closed, one or two issues, and so it goes. But along the way, I have had some amazing teachers and I've had some incredible experiences in the wild world of poetry. I should probably ask, can you all hear me? Can we bunch of nods. That's usually a good sign. Awesome. This apparently is my mic. I'm a little hunkered too because my beloved usually uses this room and she's a little shorter than I. So this is actually her laboratory of sewing that I am in at the moment. Cordoned off away from her and the cats. So um, one thing that I've written about extensively is a mountain range back home. People don't often think of mountains in Oklahoma. They're very old and very short, but they're granite, they're gorgeous, and there's a very complicated political history there. And so a lot of my own poetics has gone towards that. And as a result, there's been a lot of docupoetic things that I have explored as well. I myself have been in courses and done coursework on docupoetics from some incredible teachers. And it's a very big thing in contemporary poetics, but it's a bit misunderstood, I think, or easily misunderstood because documentary poetics, what on earth? So, as a bit of an icebreaker, let's spitball a little bit here. When we think of documentaries, what are some documentaries that come to mind when you think of a documentary? And anyone can shout it out. What do you guys think of?
And Burns.
Ooh, and Burn, that's a good one. What else?
I was just watching the new program called Human about
Oh,
origins, which was fascinating.
yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. What else? There's some classics in the PBS. Yeah, Nova, right? Nova's been going strong for years. What's the one in there's Timeline. There's quite a few series. I remember when the Discovery Channel and the History Channel was mostly documentaries. Some of y'all might as well. And I can think of some classics like The Silent World, Jacques Cousteau, about underwater, old enough that it's in black and white.
The
Lynn
Americas.
Ward's still Blackfish, contending with SeaWorld and the ethics of marine biology versus showing off animals. That was one that was very popular a few years ago. Does anyone remember Super Size Me, where the guy ate McDonald's exclusively for? Yeah, so
Uh,
the stakes are always a bit different. But some things that documentaries tend to have in common by nature are they're non-fictional, right? But beyond that, what else does documentary work typically contain in our experience based on some of the examples we've given? What do you guys think?
Well, some of it, I think, and that's what I was thinking when I was
Mm.
watching this human, is some of it is speculative. You, people, we all want to kind of interpret what happened and why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I find some of it, I go, I don't know if that's really true, or how do they know that?
Certainly, certainly. And that is definitely a big thing in poetics. We'll come back to that one. I really like that one. We'll put a pin in that one. What else? What else do documentaries typically contain? What are they made up of?
Interviews. Oh,
Go ahead. I don't know who was speaking. I'm sorry. A narrative or oh, I see we've got some chat here. So sorry. Yes, narrative or storyline. We're talking about something, and we move you through facts and events. Yeah, that's a really good, concise, general documentarian definition. Um, Quiet, consistent voices. Yes. Artifacts, very good. Original sources, archival footage, right? The Men Who Killed Kennedy. Got to see the Zapruder film 1,000 times, right? Um, Often we have interviews, yes. Reflection, people thinking about things that have happened in the past and what it means for them now or how it changed them. Ooh, slow pans over photos. Very good. Yes, this is important because it's part of the artifice, right? The lens. It's camera work, right? You have the B-roll. Nowadays, a lot of documentaries will have drone footage over the town, where the sleepy town where the murder took place, right? Movie footage, yes, definitely things from that have been in other media, news, from news archives. I recently watched a documentary on the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. A great deal of on the ground news camera footage, much of which probably was not aired at the time, some of which was,
Right.
but is in the can. And years later, people see it. Distilling the topic for general consumption, very good. Yeah, there are perimeters. It's got a start and an end, but there's a whole story there. And so it's somewhat arbitrary where we begin and end sometimes. Um, documentary,
There,
documentary. Oh, good.
I was going to say primary sources and things that were written at the
Right.
time of
Yes,
person's
absolutely.
life or whatever.
In that way, not very different from a lot of nonfiction, like books on history, right, that are well researched, will contain a great deal of outside information, primary sources. If one is talking about an event such as the Trail of Tears, there's a great deal of firsthand accounts from indigenous people. We probably have, I'm fairly certain, the congressional records on these things. Supreme Court decisions, which were ignored, right? That are there to see and to remind us that this did happen. So when we apply these to poetics, it doesn't really change, curiously enough. You see a lot of the same things. But poetry is tricky. You mentioned speculation. We're going back to that, Cynthia. Wittgenstein, we're not going to be too heavy on theory here, but my man Wittgenstein, Ludwig Wittgenstein, he pointed out that poetry does not really take place within the language game of information. He was all about the idea of different types of communication are gamic. They have rules, right? Sarcasm as a tone affects how you interact in a specific or how you respond to a specific prompt, right? Poetry doesn't have the same stakes as a nonfiction textbook, ostensibly. It's not information, but it is intense emotion recalled in tranquility. That's Wordsworth's famous quote, right? We forget the second part. You don't write it in the moment. He might not love Instagram because we're taking pictures when we should be experiencing the experience, right? But he's a big fan of looking back at the photos, at recalling that intense emotion, reigniting it in ourselves, and kind of having a better handle on it now that we've reflected and had some time to digest these experiences that we have. So if poetry does not deal with information, but it's a lot about emotion and feeling, how on earth does it contend with reality? Well, for one thing, it does all the time. So much of poetry comes from our daily lives. So much of poetry is about waking up and going out to face the day. Poetry that we don't often think of as technically non-fictional is just that. Walt Whitman was a nurse, a volunteer nurse in the Civil War, and he writes The Wound Dresser. Not quite documentarian, but not unlike a documentarian work because that's from his experience. Myth is a big thing in poetry, right? And, kind of the thing with myth is that it's somewhat zhuzhed up, right? It may not be the truth per se, but it is an ideal or something that has been streamlined and aggrandized so that it's a lofty sort of hopefully attainable thing that we might look back upon. We mythologize our heroes, we mythologize our villains, right? Certain people do not get to be human anymore in history, right? And sometimes poetry aids in that, right? Epic poems dedicated to great figures, sequences about people. Again, Whitman with When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed. Not quite documentary, but inspired by a real person, right? And very elegiac. So if nonfiction is the main thing, we could work with that. But what about all that other stuff? The lens, the footage, the camera eye. Funnily enough, it's funny how these things work. At the beginning of what we might call documentary poetics, we see the lens. Now, as big as it's become in these last several years, documentary poetry begins earlier in the 20th century. We have some formative texts that we can look at, and I'm sure that quite a few of you are familiar with some of these. Paterson by William Carlos Williams, his multi-volume work about Paterson, New Jersey. So a place that he had a lot of investment in. His home place. And he pulled from history texts, from interviews, and suddenly all of that is happening. And what at first one thinks is simply, oh, it's a poem about a place. We've read those. A nice poem about a hilltop, about a beautiful lake. I think of natural scenes. You think of Lorene Niedecker, right? But Paterson, New Jersey is so much more. And there's a weird thing that happens because poetry too is speculative because it's often led by feeling, right? You're talking about true things, but there is a lens there because you are the voice, you, the poet, are the voice through which we are hearing of these things. You are the myth maker in this point. And so when the line gets blurred, there are times where we've seen documentaries with reenactments, right? It's not always interviews and archival footage. Occasionally, we have actors acting out things in documentaries. It depends sometimes on the documentary, but that is an option. And with documentary poetics, you may hear a voice that is a composite that stands in for multiple real people, and some of their language may be lifted from actual sources. But for the purposes of the poem or the sequence, the poet may choose to take a little creative license. It's not about misleading the reader, because poetry already begins with different stakes. One does not sit down with a poetry book and go, I'm going to do research necessarily. Well, they could. But if they're wanting to learn about an event and just get the facts, ma'am, poetry may not award us that, but we come at things emotionally led. We teach logos, the facts, the deets, right? And then we have pathos, which is also very important. How we feel about these things, the value that we put upon them. So Patterson does this quite often and has that famous maxim that, Bill Williams gives us: no ideas but in things, and documentaries love their things. Museums are documentarian. Those eyewitness books that were very popular in the 90s, that's perhaps more my generation, but y'all probably remember those. A lot of photographs of items with little arrows explaining them and giving little details about, oh, this is crumpled because it was distressed in wartime and it's, army fatigues. Those little details that one can provide any number of ways. You can have the thing itself and not the myth, to quote Adrienne Rich, or you can have what that thing makes you feel, what it conjures. Case in point, with a strictly just poetic poem, one of those famous 6-word poems, Hemingway, or 6-word stories rather. For sale, baby shoes never worn. Some of you have heard that one. It's a classic. Everyone's very cynical about it, but for all we know, maybe the baby just outgrew them or they were too small. But we make that choice to go, oh, that poor baby, right? All around this object, a pair of shoes, child shoes. Think of shoes in the Holocaust, piles of shoes, a little boy's bicycle in Hiroshima, ideas in things. And documentary poetics seizes upon this quite often. So now we pivot over to another work that was begun around the time William Carlos Williams was crafting the early volumes of Patterson. We go now to my gal, Muriel Rukeyser. Now, a little bit of background on Muriel. She won the Yale Younger Poets for her first book, Theory of Flight, in 1935. She wasn't allowed to actually fly in flight school, so she wrote about it. Never spurn a poet, You end up in the book. And things about planes are all over her first book, the structures of planes. So she's already looking at things with a documentarian's eye, technical details that one might not think, oh, that's not poetic, technical manual. And she takes these things and mythologizes them quite effectively. 1938, she's been at Vassar College. She hears of things going on in West Virginia. Something is rotten in the state. There's been this incredible industrial innovation at Gauley Bridge, the Hawk's Nest, the train tracks, the tunnels. But someone had to dig those. Someone had to drill and penetrate through solid rock to produce these things. And in the process, a great many miners were exposed to silica dust, fine crystalline pieces of ore, which get into the lungs and turn the lungs to crystal. Now, these are working men, and many of them are men of color, right? Poor black men who, once they get sick, are simply quietly sort of buried in a cornfield. There are investigations. This is a little bit of a stir at this time. And Muriel says, I got to get down there. And she brings a friend, an early photography pioneer, Nancy Naumburg, a classmate from Vassar. And she's a character. She's never mentioned by name, but she is a character in these poems, Nancy. And we'll talk a bit more about Nancy here in a second. But she creates a sequence, Muriel does, called the Book of the Dead. Now, when we hear Book of the Dead, that has antecedents in culture. What other books of the dead do we have? Anybody know? We have
Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Yes, the Book of Coming and Going by Day, or the Book of the Dead. We have the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which, like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, has a different name in its original language. But in the Western world, this is what we've come to know them as. And this sort of idea of this sort of tapho-biblio sort of thing, the death book, right? Oh yeah, Tibetan. Somebody said it. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Caleb. Yes. That is in the background when Muriel sits down to write her Book of the Dead. So she goes to West Virginia. She speaks to miners. She speaks to the families of miners. And along the way, hold on just a second. All right, make sure I'm on the right thing here. Share that screen. Okay, and woohoo. All righty. So this version here, we're going to go through quite a bit of this, but we're gonna skim, but we will pause periodically as we look at this formative text of documentary poetry and talk about what makes it still poetry and what makes it weird, what makes it documentarian and different from just writing a poem about an incident or an event. This version is quite handy because it has a great deal of footnotes, this anthology edition, and we may refer back to these. Let's see here. Hopefully you folks can see this somewhat clearly. I don't know how clear it is for y'all, but I will be reading from this. So it's considered a single poem, kind of, but it is a sequence. It is a 20-poem sequence here, and it has a title poem. The last poem is called The Book of the Dead. But we begin on the road. And we'll look at some of the ways in which we enter into this world, the way that she sort of guides us as our tour guide on this event in West Virginia. So we begin on the road, and Muriel says to us, "These are roads to take when you think of your country. And interested, bring down the maps again, things. Phoning the statistician, asking the dear friend, reading the papers with morning inquiry. Or when you sit at the wheel and your small light chooses gas gauge and clock, and the headlights indicate the future of the road, your wish pursuing past the junction, the fork, the suburban station, well-traveled 6-lane highway planned for safety, the artifice of it, right? The structure of just the road itself that takes us there. Past your tall central city's influence, outside its body. So many physical things here. The body of the city. Traffic, penumbral crowds, are centers removed and strong, fighting for good reason. These roads, and she'll say this again, these roads will take you into your own country. Select the mountains, follow rivers back, travel the passes. Touch West Virginia where the Midland Trail leaves the Virginia Furnace. Iron Clifton Forge, Covington Iron goes down into the wealthy valley resorts, the Chalk Hotel, Pillars and Fairway, Spa, Sulphur Spring, White Sulphur Springs, Airport, gay blank rich faces wishing to add history to ballrooms, tradition to the first tee. The simple mountains, sheer, dark graded with pine in the sudden weather, wet outbreak of spring cross-cut by snow, wind at the hill's shoulder. The land is fierce here, steep, braced against snow, rivers, and spring. King Cole Hotel, look out, and swinging the vicious bend, New River Gorge. And here Nancy shows up. Now the photographer unpacks the camera and case, surveying the deep country, follows discovery viewing on ground glass, an inverted image, talks about the technology she's using, late 30s photography. John Marshall named the rock Steep Pines, a drop he reckoned in 1812 called Marshall's Pillar, but later Hawk's Nest. Here is your road, tying you to its meanings, gorge, boulder, precipice. Telescope down the hard and stone green river, cutting fast and direct into town. And now we're in it. Now we're here. But whoa, what a journey already. You know, to get there, you got to drive, right? You got to travel the roads that take you to your country. She's not from West Virginia, Muriel. I don't know if anyone here is. I am not. But she tells us this is our country. So let us pause already. Where do we see parallels and overlap? If this were a documentary film, how might it play out in the same way? What do you think?
She's kind of directing us what to look at, what to pay attention to.
Indeed, the lens, widening the lens. There's the bumpers, right? You know, so that the bowling ball doesn't go off. She doesn't want us to lose anything. She wants this to be clear to us. There's a bit of tour guiding, all these different things we see. A lot of imperative language, touch West Virginia, right? What else? I mentioned those drone shots that we see nowadays over quiet neighborhoods where a crime takes place, but there's also those shots of sundown out in the desert. It all depends. If your story takes place on the coast, we have footage of the water, right? We often begin and end with these natural images that lead us to wherever it is that we might be going. Shots of parts of town that have nothing to do with the event, but are establishing shots, much like film, right? If our story takes place in St. Louis, you know we're going to see those arches, right? If our story were to take place in Milwaukee, well, I suppose the Hone or a few other landmarks might work. If we're downtown, we've got Giannis on the wall. There's a few hints. Same with Chicago, right? The Willis Sears Tower and such, for instance. And that's what Muriel is giving us here. And again, she doesn't draw a lot of attention to Nancy. This is bonus information that we have by virtue of footnotes and me being your guide here today. But there's frequent moments where we have that lens, where suddenly it's not just about the poetic artifice, but we're talking about technology, right? We are talking of the things that we use to enter into these worlds in the same way that in order to enter into that mountain, men had to work and technology had to be deployed. We have a poem then that takes us to West Virginia and gives us more of the sort of background towards where we're headed. She likes to bring up John Brown. I'll tell you that much right now. So he'll show up a bit as we see here. But suddenly with our third poem, things get a little weird. Quite quickly, in fact. Statement. Philippa Allen. And our footnote lets us know that Philippa was a social worker from New York who traveled to West Virginia to work with the victims and families of Golly Bridge and the surrounding area to what can we do, right? So someone who we might interview for this a film. And oh, look at that. You like the state of West Virginia very much, do you not? I do very much in the summertime. How much time have you spent in West Virginia? You are trusted as the reader to pick up on some of these things. We were reading our landscape depictions. We are taking the road. We're in West Virginia, and then suddenly, boom, without warning, conversation. This is that Eliot stuff. This is that wasteland changed everything modernism. Suddenly, everything is on the table. Lift texts from elsewhere and find new ways to speak with them, right? Eliot, of course, was using Shakespeare and Hindu texts and German opera in the wasteland and just expected you to trust him when suddenly the voices change, when suddenly it's a little girl speaking of her memories, right? Marie, Marie, hold on tight. When it's two women discussing an abortion. Same thing here. Rookheiser is working in that fairly recent tradition at the time. And we have Philippa Allen here, or a version of what she is saying. And the language here is not quite so poetic as one might traditionally think. Moving to, let's see here, line 109 or 108 here. The tunnel is part of a huge water power project begun latter part of 1929. Direction, New Kanawha Power Co. That company licensed to develop power for public sale. Ostensibly, it was to do that, but in reality, it was formed to sell all the power to the Electro-Metallurgical Co., subsidiary of Union Carbide and Carbon County, which, by an act of the state legislature, was allowed to buy up the power company in 1933. Developing power is a big thing. That is a recurring theme. So we're getting hints in the language here of where we're going, the idea of developing power, not merely hydroelectric power, but we've already had a bit of a buyout. The almighty dollar is at work here. But the language, oh, please.
Sorry, do you want us to comment or?
Yeah, what do you think? Please.
Well, I mean, it's not poetic in the sense of necessarily the musicality of it, but
Yes.
It's laid out in like a litany formation, like, sorry, having a senior moment. Whitman, how he lists things.
Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. I was just going to say it's rendered in verse. It has line breaks, but you're absolutely right. Whitman with his big catalogs of America. We get that a micro version of that here a bit. But absolutely, it's still framed as if poetry, but the language does not have the melody we might think of as poetry. But clearly, this is pertinent information that Muriel wants us to know as we go in. I feel this investigation may help in some manner. The poems often will end with these emotional reminders to kind of help ground us after we kind of lift out into the nitty gritty and the details that seem to be less emotionally charged. We have a poem about the place itself, Dolly Bridge. Um, and again, the camera. I love that. Nancy, again, has reduced to sort of, her own sort of device. Camera at the crossing sees the city. Think about that for a second. What a modern way to approach poetics. Whitman doesn't talk a whole lot about technology, and he had photography. Very famously was photographed so much that, as he put it, the cameras are even tired of me. But there aren't a whole lot of poems where in his lists, he doesn't talk about Kodak or, what have you. You would have loved Fujifilm, Walt. But anyway, so it's a unique and kind of new territory in poetry that we are even discussing machinery and that we're using machinery as part of our lens here, much like the filmic. Camera at the crossing sees the city, a street of wooden walls and empty windows, gives us the frame, right? We have a line here that is a bit of its time in terms of its phrasing. But again, just seeing random shots of the citizens, right? Of the people on the street, those B-roll shots in between and pivotal moments in a poem. The bus station, this is at 155 here. The bus station and the great pale buses stopping for food, April glass tinted, the yellow aproned waitress. So she's taking time to really get invested too. She's not, because this is not her world, Muriel. She is a visitor. She is an outsider investigating something that has already happened and already been theoretically dealt with. But one cannot get the true story if one comes in all investigative and does not try to ingratiate themselves, does not try to meet the world on its terms. But she has that Richard Hugo lens of looking at these sad little, quiet scenes in small towns, glass, wood, and naked eye. The movie house, what an old-timey way to say it. The movie house, closed for the afternoon, frames posters streaked with rain. Wow. So she wants us to care. This is not just some place she's here for the salaciousness of it. Something that's very popular in contemporary documentaries, true crime. We have an obsession with true crime in this contemporary world. And so many great documentaries are about just horrific things people have done. But we need to care about the human spirit for these stories to impact us. We need to see our own country in these. Through this lens, we stop and go, well, I'm not from West Virginia, but some of this is not so far removed from my world, right? I grew up grandson of farmers, no miners, but people who were often marginalized or ignored by the world. And so when I hear Muriel, or when I read her lovingly look at these places and just this is what I saw of it. You have to have that lens in order to truly reckon with these things. What do you guys think about that? Just the thoughts in general there before we move on.
Well, I was thinking about Dorothea Lange and the photographs during the Depression.
Yeah.
And James Agee's book, but it's not poetry. It's prose, but the idea of going in and studying a community and then trying to, sort of like a journalist, trying to explain what's going on.
There is a certain journalistic artifice going on here. I mean, there's also, you could make a great indie film, fictionalizing just Muriel and Nancy on a road trip. Like, let's check this out. Let's raise some awareness. Let's learn something about what's going on here. Absolutely. Anybody else? Anyone else? Thoughts?
It's investigative.
It is investigative.
Yeah.
We want
So
to
she
share it. Go ahead.
Right. She wants to share everything that she's seeing with us and through her words, although we don't have the photographs. We have
Mm.
her words describing it so much that we can feel like we are there.
And we'll talk briefly about the photographs in a moment. I'm glad you brought that up because obviously Nancy is at the edge of this. She appears in the poem. So where are the pictures? We'll come back to that.
Seth,
Yeah,
I'm noticing a mood too. I think
please.
besides just telling what we see, she's giving us a mood that sets the scene, at least to
Absolutely.
me.
No, absolutely. In the same way that um, I would say a film documentary would as well. If this is a somber tale, the framing will reflect that, including the additional media, the music, right, often leads how we are to read a moment. Now, there's no music here per se. Well, we'll get to some blues. Um, Anybody else before we? These are very, very well said. I really appreciate those insights. Yeah.
I think I would add one more thing, which is it's hard to put into words, but I guess that it's complex in a way that there's multiple sources of information, and then
Hmm.
so multiple things that the writer is commenting on, or may have an opportunity to comment on just by bringing it
Hmm.
to the poem. So there's a wide variety of material that she's building on, and
And
it's just giving me ideas as a writer, like how to take current issues for me, things that I'm obsessed with right now, and how could I put them all into one piece?
well, good, because that is where we are headed, as I'm sure you could, most of you could predict. So I'm glad that you're already kind of maybe thinking about what you might be doing for our second meeting. That's excellent. Because she also obscures those sources, doesn't she? Like it's a poem. And so to go back to Wittgenstein, it's not playing the language game of information, which means that even if it's giving true tales and true information, it's not necessarily expected to cite its sources in the way that a researched essay might or a book. It may, the poet may do so. Rookheiser in the original published versions, there weren't really much in the way of footnotes. You know, you would have to learn from, excuse me, research or later anthologies that Philippa Allen was a real person, or that other figures like George Robinson might be composites based on multiple people she spoke with. Perhaps people wanted not to have their real names used, for instance, because she spoke with a great many individuals, right? She and Nancy went to people's houses and spoke with them. We have in praise of the committee where there's a committee that is formed to investigate these miners all dying of this disease. Um, there are probably quite a few sources going on here. References to real people, Senator Holt, who is Rush Dew Holt of West Virginia, who testified at the subcommittee that investigated this. George Robinson has his own poem. He's here at line 277. He's about to give his own voice. Let's see here. We have Merle Blankenship, a laborer on the project. So someone who actually got the disease. And we have here, this may not be exactly Merle's words, but Rookheiser is trying to get the spirit of what Merle might say. Line 325. Dear sir, my name is Merle Blankenship. I have worked for the Reinhardt and Dennis Company many days and many nights, and it was so dusty you couldn't hardly see the lights. I helped nip steel for the drills and helped lay the track in the tunnel and done lots of drilling near the mouth of the tunnel when the shots went off. The boss said, if you're gonna work, venture back in the boss was Mr. Andrews, and now he is dead and gone, but I am still here, lingering along. Do you hear the voice? Do you hear the dialect?
Yeah.
She faithfully reproduces the West Virginia, in this particular, individual, the way in which Merle speaks. So here we have this note. He didn't testify to the subcommittee, but Muriel and Nancy, Rookheiser and Naumburg, met him when they traveled. And so would have heard him speak in his vernacular and chose to preserve that when she could have elided it. She could have streamlined it into a more poetic, device or something like that. But then it wouldn't have been as authentic. wouldn't have been him, and it wouldn't have been his story, even if it's not quite his words, if that makes sense. It's very mythic too, though, because Muriel is working in that post-wasteland modernist mode where it's like, what do we do with those old myths? What do we make of them now? This poem is an incredible combination. This is from the perspective of a mother who loses her children, her son, to the silicosis. And of course, Absalom is King David's son. You have the whole biblical narrative. But this poem also quotes the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And some of these little poetic verses. Notice this is poems within poems. So we'll go to from 360 to 370 here. This is the mother. I first discovered what was killing these men. I had 3 sons who worked with their father in the tunnel. Cecil, age 23, Owen, age 21, Shirley, age 17. They used to work in a coal mine, not steady work, for the mines were not going much of the time. A power company foreman learned that we made homebrew. He formed a habit of dropping in evenings to drink, persuading the boys and my husband, give up their jobs and take this other work. It would pay them better again with the capitalism. Shirley was my youngest son, the boy. That pause, the boy, the emphasis. He went into the tunnel. So now we're descending into the underworld. Now we've got Dante going on here. Now we have the whole mythic world of the Inferno. And suddenly, my heart, my mother, my heart, my mother, my heart, my coming into being, which is lifting, if not exact language, the cadence of pyramid texts and ancient hymns found within the Book of the Dead. My husband is not able to work. He has it, according to the doctor. We've been having a very hard time making a living since this trouble came to us. So this is a persona poem. This isn't just interview, and it doesn't work as much with vernacular, but it is much like Spoon River Anthology. It is one voice, one person, and then I guess the ghost voice. I saw the dust in the bottom of the tub. The boy worked there about 18 months. That emphasis that he was to her a child, her son. Came home one evening with a shortness of breath. He said, "Mother, I cannot get my breath." Shirley was sick about 3 months. I would carry him from his bed to the table, from his bed to the porch, in my arms. My heart is mine in the place of hearts. They gave me back my heart. It lies in me. In Egyptian mythology, your heart is weighed with the feather of truth when you die. And if it is heavier, you're in trouble. If it's heavy with sin, but if it balances, you go off to the field of reeds, to your final reward. When they took sick right at the start, I saw a doctor. I tried to get Dr. Harless to x-ray the boys. He was the only man I had any confidence in, the company doctor in the copper's mine, but he would not see Shirley. He did not know where his money was coming from. I promised him half if he'd work to get compensation, but even then he would not do anything. I went on the road and begged the x-ray money. The Charleston Hospital made the lung pictures, still a little bit folksy, right? You know, I don't know all the technical language, but I had to deal with this and I had to reckon with it. So that's what they were, the pictures, the lung pictures. He took the case after the pictures were made, and 2 or 3 doctors said the same thing. The youngest boy did not get to go down there with me. He lay and said, "Mother, when I die, I want you to have them open me up and see if that dust killed me. Try to get compensation. You will not have any way of making your living when we are gone and the rest are going too. I have gained mastery over my heart. I have gained mastery over my 2 hands. I have gained mastery over the waters. I have gained mastery over the river." The case of my son was the first of the line of lawsuits. They sent the lawyers down and the doctors down. They closed the electric sockets in the camps. There was Shirley and Cecil and Jeffrey and Orrin, Raymond Johnson, Cleve and Oscar Anders, Frank Lynch, Henry Palff, Mr. Pitch, a foreman, a slim fellow who carried steel with my boys. His name was Darnell, I believe. There were many others. The towns of Glen Ferris, Alloy, where the White Rock lies. 6 miles away, Veneta, Golly Bridge, Gamoka, Lockwood, the gullies, the whole valley is witness. Come back to that. I hitchhike 18 miles. They make checks out. They ask me how I keep the cow on $2, which is a lot more in 1938, a lot more in a rural area. I said 1 week, feed the cow. 1 week, the children's flower. The oldest son was 23. The next son was 21. The youngest son was 18. They called it pneumonia at first. They would pronounce it fever. Shirley asked that we try to find out. That's how they learned what the trouble was. I open out a way. This is right from the Book of the Dead. Have covered my sky with crystal lungs. I come forth by day. I am born a second time. I force a way through and I know the gate. I shall journey over the earth among the living. And then Mother says, he shall not be diminished. Never. I shall give mouth to my son. Also a funeral ritual, the opening of the mouth so that the dead may speak again. Now that's a lot, but I wanted to focus on that poem because it's so much of the heart of this matter, and it's not as technical, and yet it provides so many details. Let us reflect, friends. What do we make of this one? Playing with the myth in the true tragedy here.
It's so much more powerful than if we were reading it in prose, in exposition.
Indeed. The pauses, the word choice, poetry, the right words in the right order. Well said, well said. The whole valley is witness. Go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was going to speak. The whole valley is witness. These are poetics of witness, journalism, investigation. But Muriel, again, is not from this area. She needs someone else's voice to help her. And she finds not only the mother's voice, but the mother finds the son's voice. Because I assume we are to take that the passages of the dead are the dead, ergo her children gone before, her husband speaking, journeying over the earth. And that's her giving us those words back, opening her son's mouth, metaphorically speaking, to say, someone will fight for my boys. Powerful stuff. This is the interview, right? This is the mom looking out, those shots of, family. I notice they always, in documentaries, they won't let you turn lights on in your own living room. And you sit at the table and have to tell about the horrible thing that happened to you. It's always dramatic lighting, natural light coming in, wisps and such. One might imagine that here, but we don't need that artifice. We're in the cosmos. We're in the mythic lands here. We have the poem here, The Disease. Any other thoughts on this poem before we move?
Well, you have the poetics and you have the mythology and have all of that, but you also have evidence. This is truth. This is, the truth is underneath all of this. And so that this is what happened.
Absolutely. When we move to the disease, I like how we break this up too. These could be sections. Sometimes we have part 1, part 2, chapters, much like books in documentaries, or episodes. Sometimes a documentary is a series, right? It's a mini series, and there are multiple episodes. We might treat any one of these poems in that same way, as vignettes. This one is about the disease. It discusses rather analytically the view of what it does to the lungs, the way it crystallizes the lungs and makes breathing near impossible. Come to the window again. Here is the heart. We've got the heart again that we're weighing, literally looking at and weighing now, not merely as some hereafter artifice. More numerous nodules, thicker, see in the upper lobes. You will notice the increase here, streaked, fibrous tissue. Indicating, we have the committee, the voice of God, of the authority right here. that indicates the progress in 10 months' time. And now this year, short breathing, solid scars, even over the ribs, thick on both sides, blood vessels shut. Model conglomeration. I'm going to skip to the end of this one. This is so stark, and it has that sort of controversial testimony sort of moment. This is what happens, isn't it? A choking off in the air cells? Yes. There is difficulty in breathing. Yes. And a painful cough? Yes. Does silicosis cause death? Yes, sir. And another persona, George Robinson. Now here, this is not a critique, but this is a little more a product of the time. Soma Sharif, Iranian-American poet, has said before that one must be careful about writing in a voice that one has not necessarily grieved in. But I do appreciate that Rookheiser said, I'm going to give voice not merely to the poor white miners, but she specifically does a poem for one of the black miners, George Robinson. She does it in the form of a blues, and she tries to preserve an African American vernacular here. What's most interesting to me is the conclusion, how all of these men, because they are all essentially of the same income, right? And they're all united in terms of class, if not by race and privilege. As dark as I am, when I came out at morning after the tunnel at night with a white man, nobody could have told which man was white. The dust had covered us both, and the dust was white. We could read a whole lot into that, certainly. Very heavy stuff, yes. I would encourage all of you to go and read this entire collection. I know we're kind of greatest hitsing it a bit here, but it's a powerful, powerful sequence, and it's very formative to what we're talking about. So we have the doctors. Again, you can just by looking, we see how suddenly we collapse into prose here. Suddenly we are in a non-fictional mode, it would seem, and the artifice collapse, and we widen the lens again, right? Muriel is working on so many fronts here. It's fantastic. Dr. Goldwater, and then it's just quotes, testimony. Look at this. Not what we may think of as poetics necessarily, but so relevant and a different mode and cadence for us than if, as you had said, if we were merely reading this only as prose. Different effect. Our guy George, he shows up again. So we have recurring characters here. These are real people appearing in multiple narratives. Arthur Payton here, what's his story? Engineer of the tunnel project, yes. The dust, the failure. We're using poetic designs here. It's 645, the way the lines pull apart from each other. Notice the variety of how she renders. We've got, like, Alloy here is in tercets. Yeah, tercets, 3-line stanzas. Very classically poetic. Some of these other poems, longer lines, more irregular line breaks. And Rookheiser is fond of technology, so she goes through things about power and about the dam. She is impressed by what was achieved here, right? But at what cost? We talk about the dam. Where is it? Ah, yes, our one caveat into visualization here, which is discussing the stocks, again, the money. How best to say it? Muriel simply shows us here a stock quote this is an actual newspaper quote from the Union Carbide stock showing its gain in value over 1 day's trading. Now, I don't know a lot about this sort of thing. This world's a bit alien to me, but Muriel felt that this said it better than she could in any other way, just show you the visual. Before we move to finally the bill and our finale of this section, any other thoughts? It's a lot all at once, I realize, but you guys are game for it, I think. Copies the language of a document, right? The whereas, that the Hawk's Nest Tunnel was constructed, tells us by who, that a tunnel was drilled, that most of the tunnel drilled rock contained 90, even 99% pure silica. This is what these men were breathing every day as they did this. That silica Oh, I love this is a fact that was known, right? That passive language, mistakes were made, always fits in. This is why nobody gets blamed, right? Silica is dangerous to the lungs of human beings when submitted to contact. Silicosis. When we conclude, though, it's not enough. After the committee, after there have been things, discussed, the subcommittee here at 10:30, the subcommittee subcommits. I love the dryness, the bitterness now that Muriel has. Words on a monument, Capitoline thunder. It cannot be enough. The origin of storms is not in clouds. Our lightning strikes when the earth rises. Spillways, free, authentic power, talking about power and spillways as a metaphor now. Dead John Brown's body, loves her John Brown, walking from a tunnel to break the armored and concluded mind. She often refers to him as, I guess because he got shit done, so to speak. She likes to bring John Brown up as a guy who's not afraid to do whatever he wants to do for something. So he pops up in her poetry quite a bit. It's a whole narrative and it's so complicated. But at the end, after all this investigation, Muriel steps back and goes, what really happened? What did we do for these men? Was this justice, this Capitoline thunder, as she puts it? And sometimes, and this is how the documentaries always go, right? The murder is unsolved or the guy goes to jail, but the loved ones are still gone. The child is still missing. The terrorism has already taken place. The damage has been done. And you have the survivors, we the living, right? Which brings us at last to the title poem. And she brings up that phrase again. These roads will take you into your own country. And a lot of the same language is reused. The facts of war forced into actual grace. It's war for her. We're fighting. This could have been her in Boston, right? In Massachusetts, in another life, if she hadn't been born who she was. She gives us a much grander than what we began with, sweeping sort of globe look all through the world. All to say, what does this mean? What have we done? Investigate. Witness. Carry abroad here at 1160. Carry abroad the urgent need. She gives us a command. The scene to photograph. Again, modern ways of looking at these things. To photograph and to extend the voice. A poem is telling us to take pictures, everyone. To document. Which in an era where lies are the only thing that get rewarded is increasingly relevant. Voices to speak to us directly as we move, as we enrich, growing in larger motion, this word, this power, power again. Down coasts of taken countries, the colonialism, mastery, discovery at one hand, at the other frontiers and forests, fanatic, cruel legend at our back, and speeding ahead the red and open west, and this, our region, not just your country, but now our region. Desire, field, beginning. These are those shots of the city as we leave at the end of the film, right? Name and road, communication to these many men as epilogue, seeds of unending love. Wow, okay. There's so much we could do with this. And I know we've had to kind of jump around a bit to get a bigger picture here, but we end mythic again while keeping our main task at hand. But this is how she frames this non-fictional story at the end. What do you make of that? What does she want us to do? Carry abroad the urgent need. What can we do with this narrative?
It's a call to action, to be empathetic and to, I don't know the history of the legislation or whatever came out of it, but I think that's part of it, to support to support awareness for the issue and then to correct it.
Yes. Yes. To not forget these men, right?
Right.
Words on a monument. The names, so many names that are brought up, right? The mother and Absalom names all those men, makes them alive again. To say the name of the dead, to use the Egyptians, is to make them live again, to open the mouth. Don't
And
forget.
To bear
Sorry.
witness.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I was going to say to bear witness
Yes.
to
Yes, yes,
their
yes.
lives lived and damage is done, and they're gone, but we still can remember them. And obviously their friends and family will remember them, but
Mhm.
we can keep them in mind too. And when there's future injustices, to bear witness to that and make it known.
Maybe that's what she means by your country, that relatability. Again, this could have been you in another life. Maybe this will be you one day, right? You don't know. Someone else was going to speak. What else were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say that it's ironic that she talks about a monument, which is a piece of stone.
Mm,
The stone has caused their debilitation and their death.
no ideas, but in things. Yes, 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 yes. It's heavy stuff. And notice how mythic it remains. This is nonfiction, kind of, but it's poetry, and so the rules are different. The expectations of truth are smeared a little bit, right? But I don't think Muriel is trying to pull the wool over our eyes. She's not trying to mislead us. She's not trying to make up, I made up a minor and here's his story, right? She's trying to streamline the narrative for her purposes while still being true to it and giving these men credit, I think.
Do we know at all if anything about how the people that they interviewed felt about this? And the reason I'm asking is I
Mm,
remember hearing that the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald song was what people from the families were very against it and
mm,
completely turned around on that
mm.
after after a while, and it came out and what it did for their families and that. And I just think I wonder what these people that talked with them felt about her doing this.
That's a good question. I feel I've read a bit on this. It's been a while. There was definitely some response. There were definitely thoughts. I will say this. This is a good pivot, actually. I appreciate that. So in 1938, when this first appeared as the first half of Muriel's second book, US 1, of course, named for a highway, right? For a road. None of Nancy's photographs were included because it's 1938 and printing is a bit expensive and we're coming out of the Depression. But Nancy is a part of this. And it wouldn't be for another 80 years until a standalone edition of just this sequence by itself was published, which included Nancy's photographs in 2018, and it was published by the University of West Virginia Press. Ah, so it's not forgotten there. What
Yeah.
happened there is still like well known and well documented, and the fact that she brought some attention to it is still there. But I would love to know like descendants if they have any thoughts. We'll be coming up on the centennial of this collection, in the following decade. In 3 years, it'll be 90 years old. What does it look like now? Is that, how much of that technology there is still like, has it been changed since then? What does that whole area, the Hawk's Nest and Golly Bridge? I don't know. That would definitely be worth looking into. Um, Last, we're going to move into imagery and stuff here, but any last big thoughts on Muriel in the Book of the Dead, this very important formative docupoetic sequence?
I'm just a little confused because I don't really know about that part of history, and I'm also not familiar with all these references. And so I'm trying to figure out at what point in the poem, as an ignorant or a reader, one realizes it's a documentary poem because the first part about taking a road seems to be just description.
Hmm.
And then you sort of pick up, yeah, I guess they're talking about something about lungs. And I'm asking this because I want to get it. It's not because I'm trying to dismiss anything, except that how do you know it's documentary if you don't know the whole story beforehand to put it into a place with documentation?
That's a very good question, because if one were to encounter this collection in the wild, there might be some confusion. But when we pick up a book, when we find a text, there's usually some context around it, right? We don't usually go in, for lack of a better word, blindly. But you're absolutely right. That first poem it just sounds rather descriptive and almost bucolic at times, right? You know, kind of the road and the landscape. Taken by itself, that poem is seemingly just a poem about taking a road trip through West Virginia. As the beginning of something else, though, I think it takes on a slightly different identity, but it is context dependent. You'll notice that we had the poems that are more like documentarian in the sense of, yeah, interviews, more technical. The language is less melodic and versic, lyrical. That's the word I wanted, lyrical. And then others are much more so, like this final poem, quite poetic, right? And kind of summing up what we've experienced. That's the beautiful thing about documentary poetics. It's the same thing with a documentary film. It's not always operating in the same mode. A documentary film will have brand new footage, right? Often scenes, sequences, new interviews. And that's in its own cadence, right? And that's in its own sort of department. And then you have interviews, and then you have footage. And by themselves, they are simply items, right? They're simply archival pieces of information, but put together as this sort of gestalt, right? As this sort of cybernetic combination of different things, it creates a much bigger narrative. Um, Now, when Muriel does it, again, she's mostly dealing with text, right? But we live in a modern age where printing has become a little bit, well, maybe not cheaper, but more readily available. Indie presses, right? People are making their own chapbooks and collections and don't even need to send it to a contest or what have you. And the funny thing that comes out of that is that visualization has become a much more integral part of modern documentary poetics. But again, an image by itself is merely an image. So, case in point, this is a good opportunity to pivot, I think, and also to test. Okay, when I change the tab, does it change for y'all? Good, that's what I wanted to hear. So, you can't read these on your end, that's all right. I'm going to pull this one up here. These are all shots, pages from DMZ Colony by Dong-Mi Choi, a Korean American who won the Pulitzer for this book here from Wave Books, DMZ Colony. Look at that cool graphic cover, where she discusses the not so wholesome history of South Korea after the war. In the West, we often think of North Korea is the scary Korea, right? It's the Korea where there's the human rights violations. South Korea, on the other hand, is an ally. The post-war years were very rough in Korea. The regime of Syngman Rhee is very infamous. There was a lot of persecutions, and a lot of people had to flee, including Dong-Mi Choi's family. So these are some personal photographs we see here. And it's just a photograph by itself. But this text that's below it here that you can't quite read, flowers on dresses, flowers on mountains, sparrows at DMZ, demilitarized zone, red-crowned cranes feeding nearby, spoonbills lying low, montage, and this is a quote because it's in italics. Montage is an idea that arises from the collision of independent shots, a panorama of divided chirps. In her language here, it's beautiful and poetic in some ways. And then suddenly that quote reminds us that you pair things together and they become something new, right? That's how does she put it? Montage, which is another film device, right? Where you just have several different shots of from different sources all combined to tell some kind of quick rapid fire message within a larger work. Montage, that juxtaposing. So these are just photographs, and that's just a little bit of poetry, but on a page, and the page is, as you can see here, it's solid black. That's a lot of ink. This is not a cheap book. $20. Well, that's about average now, but it takes some artifice. This book is full of images that are paired with poems. She has poems that are supposed to be narratives from letters from people who survived being put into camps, that were persecuted, political prisoners, and it'll have their age, and then it'll have a notebook image in their handwriting or purporting to be their handwriting. Again, often it's blurred for us. It's not clear to us what she is abbreviating or what she is lifting from directly. Like here we have orphan Cheo Gyom Jom, age 13, and it's just in Korean in the Hangul script, just a notebook page. And then on the facing page is the text version. And there's an effect of that because it makes it, I would say, a little realer for us in some ways. Look, someone actually wrote this down. This isn't just me taking on a persona and saying, what was it like in South Korea at this time? These are real people who still are with us, and they've lived this, and who better to tell the story? So at that point, the poet or the author is more of a curator in some ways, putting things together, compiling, archiving, and finding connections between these disparate objects and these disparate modes of thinking. Taking a poem where we're driving into a place to set the scene, as film might, and then moving us to interview where we get the details of what actually happened. But it's all part of the documentary. And that's it's complicated. It's it's definitely something that one might encounter and go, oh my, what on earth is this? What am I to make of this book? All right. What do you guys think in that regard? That was a big answer, I realize.
It does make you rethink what poetry is in a
Certainly.
way.
Oh, yes.
I think for some of us who are of an age where we're doing a lot of reflecting about our lives,
Mm-hmm.
it sort of legitimizes any poetry that we might write about things that have happened to us over
There you
the
go.
course of our history. And at this point, at least for me, and I guess there's a lot of people on this call, we have history to share.
We
And
certainly do.
so the question is is it okay? It gives us permission to do that, I think.
Very good. Yeah, permission, so to speak. Muriel kind of had to travel. She didn't really have, I would say, personal stock in her story, her or Nancy. More recent examples are a lot more personalized in that regard. I'm glad that she did what she did because, number one, so much comes after that in poetry. Like she gives us that permission. We can investigate, we can treat poetry journalistically, and it still be poetry, right? Still write poems around it. Sometimes it's going to be one thing or another. But this list here, and this is not comprehensive, but you'll notice a lot of these are fairly recent, and most of them have a lot of personal stake. Eve Ewing is an African American woman, and so she writes about the centennial of the Chicago race riot and calls it 1919, right? And reflects on it using a more modern lens, the Afrofuturism, like how can we look at the future by looking at the past? Ileana Rocha, some of you may recognize this name. She was our final judge for this past year's chapbook contest. This is her second book, and she talks about, she's from Texas, and she talks about the Texas killing fields, about a few famous murders, all using the lens of her grandfather's murder is unsolved. And she wanted to learn about it. She has persona poems looking at her grandmother's words. There are pages that include her grandfather's death certificate is on one page. There's autopsy sheets, things that she had to, here's the incident report, and then there's a poem next to it, right? I know that's not super clear, but the point being is it's multimedia, right? Visualization, and that's some, oh, there it is. Wow. That's some serious stuff, you know, and that might have been very difficult to look at, to find this and realize this is, you know, this is an image of what happened to someone on whom your life depends, right? Very personal stake in this. Birds by Beatrice Simkowiak is a fun one because it remixes. Remixing is a big thing in these in docupoetics. She takes language from Audubon's Birds of America and turns them into these short little sad poems reflecting on how much we've lost, like bird populations decreasing every year. And so she looks back at a time when we were still curating kind of our history of American birds and says, what would Audubon think of this? And points out that quite often, in order to study the birds, he had to kill them. So even our antecedents, right, will often surprise us with their choices, or even perhaps arguably their complicity in these things. Whereas by Layli Long Soldier uses the congressional resolution of apology to Native Americans during Barack Obama's presidency, and she is a member of the Sioux Nation. And she said, well, let's talk about that, because these resolutions use that word whereas, just like we saw this causes silicosis. We saw that with the committee. She takes that word whereas and says, what does that really mean? And breaks it down for us. I can make this list available to folks if they are curious. Again, you'll notice that most of these are fairly recent. Some of them have won prizes. This also won the Pulitzer Prize, Tahimba Jess's Olio. And just looking at this list here, you'll see they're all doing very different things, but it's often about reviewing events that have already happened, as a documentary is. Some of you know Amanda's book, if you've not read Marilyn, incredible. And this is a great example of, it has, you know, pictures from her like legal documents as a citizen, right? And as someone who was adopted from internationally, right? From the Philippines. And then the next page will be a personal memoir. It'll almost feel like an essay at times. So you're bending the genre a little bit. Documentary poetry, much like documentary film, allows you to take all kinds of stuff and cram it and connect it and find new ways in which they might enrich each other, so to speak. I see we've got a bit in the chat here. I apologize. Oh, yes. Okay. I'll make sure to make that available. Okay. Yeah, again, not comprehensive, but these are options that are available that you should all look at. And lastly, before we move into our final bit here, I did mention I was going to bring up Petrichor. So this is the magazine I edit. And we did a docupoetics issue, which is issue 19. And everybody did something different with it. Monica here was very visual with it. She took pictures from a German Bible of her families. That's what this text here with the leaves are. And then this is taking from documentation here. She explains it down here. So these second ones, Consolidated Interrogation Report, are composed on stills from a family film, so from her family, 1940, in which my uncle is sitting in the lap of Hans Karl von Hasselbach, my grandfather's friend from university. Hasselbach was one of Hitler's personal physicians from 1936 to 1934. The way in which, you know, just blue-collar, average Joe people intersect with these mythic people, right? Because Hitler's one of those people. He doesn't get to be human anymore. He's been mythologized as the great villain of the 20th century. But Mr. Hasselbach was dismissed from raising concerns about the medications Hitler's chief physician was prescribing. and was sent to serve in a field hospital on the Western Front. The text is cut from a photocopy of the 1945 U.S. military interrogation of Hasselbach after the war, in which he provided details about Hitler's anatomy and medical conditions. So these are all pulled from the interrogation, and look how she visualizes them. And that kind of gross dissonance of seeing an innocent child, brushing up against Nazism. This is a poem. It's very visual and it is an art piece in and of itself, but it is also a poem because a poem in Greek, poema, is a made thing. That's all it is. Just like the novel just means something new, right? To essay is to try something. In this essay, I will try something. Monica's an example. Kai Minosh Pyle is an indigenous writer who, pulling from Ojibwe texts, mythologies, creates this incredible visual piece where he literally collages the source text. You see all the different fonts here, and that's a very old book right there, to create three rather, poems. One combining English with an indigenous language. One is just the indigenous language. And then one is the English version, but it's the same thing. This is a translation of that to interrogate myth, and also to play around with gender, because the myth that they're playing with is where a spirit, is it Nana? Yeah, Nanabushu, the trickster figure in Anishinaabe stories, transforms into a woman so that he, she, they may marry a warrior. And Kai is non-binary and two-spirit and working within this world and thinking about what that means in a contemporary and complicated world when it comes to gender and sexuality, looks back in their own right mythology and in their own people's stories to make sense of themselves. It's a beautiful thing. And so that is what you guys are going to be challenged to do. And you have many ways in which you may go about this. Some of the poems might just be poems, but in a sequence, they should tell a story. They should tell us about something. Everybody's is going to look very differently here. I'm keeping it fairly open-ended, but a lot of you probably know what you want to write about already. Who was it spoke earlier, said they were already getting some ideas? Who, hold on, let me unshare the, screen here.
Yeah, that was me.
Yes. Yes, Andrea, what are you thinking about? If you don't, do you mind sharing?
Well, I have two ideas. One was taking a previous series of poems and playing with it in order to, go back to the sources that inspired those poems. And because they all do hang together from a specific time period, and I think that this would work well for them. I
think so too.
And give them some new spice or life. And then the other idea is just kind of looking at our contemporary moment and things that I've focused on, which are so many, and kind of using some of the current texts and trying to capture this moment right now.
Wow, I love that. I mean, there's so much to reckon with right now. So many things that we're expected to respond to even. And it's intense and it's often very ugly. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Does anyone else want to share kind of what they're thinking, what you're kind of maybe wanting to cook up, or if you're like, what do you think of this?
I don't really know what I'm going to cook up, but I like the idea of the author as a curator. For that, it really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell my students this as well, Laura. They're all archives. Everyone in this room, in this digital room, is an archive because only you have your experiences and your understanding of them. Not to get all theoretical, but the eye that approaches the text, as Roland Barthes put it, is already multiple selves. When we sit down to read something, we bring us to it. And then when we sit down to write, we bring the history of a language with us. No pressure, right?
None.
Absolutely. So yeah, this can look many ways, folks. You can be pulling quotes from things. You could interview someone. You could pull from documents. When I write about the Wichita Mountains, I have congressional documents from the 1950s about transferring land to the Fort Sill Army base. This was a big controversy. It kind of whittled down some of the refuge, which was a game preserve. And there was a lot of talk about, are these missiles going to be dangerous? Is this bad for the wildlife? Why are we giving away more of this land? And so I will take photocopies because you can find these, on different databases and such. Um, and oh my goodness, I meant to share an example. I took a article called "The Last Bears of the Wichitas," which was about because bears have died out from there long since. And I took that and I erased pieces of it and created new poems out of, did erasures. Some of you are familiar with blackout poetry. That too is docupoetic because you were using sources and creating new thoughts for them. I know we're very close to the end here, but I will very briefly, because I did pull it up, show you Tracy K. Smith, our former poet laureates. Some of you have probably seen this. This is her erasure of the Declaration of Independence, where instead of being about the grievances of the colonists, it's about the slaves. He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. This is, of course, talking about King George, but not anymore. He has plundered our, ravaged our, destroyed the lives of our, taking away our, and she goes on and on to rethink this very familiar formative text that is a part of America's identity and say, well, let's talk about that all men are created equal thing. Tom, let's talk about that. Taken captive on the high seas to bear. It's a completely different message now, and that's all that she needed to say it. That's on the table too, folks. If any of you like your collages, you like to get around with some scissors and paper, well, you saw what Monica did. Oh, yes. Thank you, Caleb. From a scholarly article on soil. This is in the chat from the late great magazine Tagwerk. I don't think they're doing new issues anymore, but wow, cool. Now, I realized something, Tori. We didn't really talk about the best way to get materials to me. Should we just give them my email address or
No, how about you have, well, first of all, do you want to read them in ahead of time? I'm guessing you probably do, right?
I do, yes. But I want to give people a little time, so
Do you want to read them Monday the 13th or do you want them over the previous weekend?
let's give people as much time as possible. I think Monday the 13th,
Okay.
and then that Thursday is when we would be converging.
Yep. So that would mean if everybody could get me their poem by midnight on that Sunday, I will compile it all for you.
All right. Wow.
How does that sound?
I was ready to do extra work, but that works.
No, I will compile it all for you.
Well,
And
I
if you
appreciate that.
and if anybody ends up doing a visual poem, you probably should send me a PDF
Yes.
so it doesn't blow up when I try to assemble it.
We want fidelity. We want your
Yep.
narratives and your pieces to be represented correctly.
Yep. And you don't have to wait to that Sunday. I mean, if you write this poem next week, send it to me as you write them. And then I'll just compile them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I'll get them to Seth that Monday, and then he will review them on Thursday.
Linda's asking, I think for you, I guess, would it be the WFOP address email? Where would you want that sent?
Oh, no, it'd be my personal one, ToriGrantWellhouse@gmail.com. The one I emailed you guys on with.
Okay. So everybody should have it. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I know we're a little over, but does anyone have any questions? Yeah, if you want to paste that in there, Tori. Does anyone have any questions about anything? It's pretty free form, but I feel like we're cooking with gas. What do y'all think?
So the list of examples, that was different than your petrichor. So
yes, but I can provide both.
You can get that to Tori and she can get it to us.
That's the best way to do it. I will send the list to Tori. I was thinking about the logistics there. I will send the list to Tori and I will send you the link. I think Caleb also posted a few of them. Thank you, Caleb. Caleb is not a paid intern. He's not like my plant here or anything, but we are buddies. Appreciate that, Caleb. So yes, issue 19 is a good example if you want to see some weird, wild options. There's even a video in there someone did.
I was talking more about the list of
Sure,
that was white letter is on black.
certainly.
Yeah. What the white letters on black is collections, and the
Correct.
petricolor is individual poems. So one or other of them might be more accessible to you.
Certainly.
So
Certainly.
we'll send both.
I love options. I love, because these are all going to look so different. Yes, Cynthia, please.
Can you spell petricolor?
I sure can. It's the uninitiated. No, it's the smell of rain. It's that
Okay.
ozone pulled down, and the
Okay.
musk, that rocky smell. Petrichor. I thought it
There's
was
an
good.
L in it.
No, no. Although that almost sounds like a cleaning product, petrichlor, right?
Yeah.
Got
So
Clorox.
could you spell it again? Would you please? Petra.
Petrichor.
Petrichor.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also, it's in the chat too. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So
Yeah,
Tori, is he going to share with us the poems? Are there too many people that you need to put a limit on it?
Ooh, that's
Well,
good.
there's 25 of us here,
Ooh.
and if he can review at a decent clip, we can usually get through 20. So I guess if we go over 20, if we go over 20, I'll randomize it.
And it's going to be the same format of him reading and the author answering questions and
Right.
and anybody else.
Ideally, I'll talk a lot less in the next one
Right.
because we're going to really workshop it. So
Yeah,
but I will lead the
usually
discussion.
how we work, the Seth and the poet will talk, and the rest of us will just comment in the chat so that we can then move on to the next poem. And then I can share the chat along with the video. Does that work?
Any other questions?
So this is really basic. So we should sign up for the second session then.
Yeah, Elise.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I'll send that in my email too, the link to that.
Okay. Thank
Sue,
you.
you had a question? I'm sorry, Sue.
And if I'm not able to make it to the next session, will it be recorded?
It will be recorded, but I think it's only fair that Seth reviews poems for people who are going to be there. And then it's up to him if he wants to comment offline.
On the down low, I do like reading poems, Sue. So, if you still want to share them at some point.
Okay, great. I'll do that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Don't want anyone feeling like they don't know what the heck we're doing here. So, well, thank you, Andrea. I appreciate that. I hope you guys learned a little something. I know it's a weird subject, but it is very, very in the now as far as like modern poetics with multimedia and stuff. We can do some weird, wild stuff here. And I encourage you guys to get personal with it, make it weird, make us cry, make us laugh, make us scratch our heads. If we don't get it all first time, good.
You are a really good reader of poems too. Wow, I could
Thank
listen to you all night.
I appreciate that, Tori. I learned from Caleb.
Thank you.
And anybody has any questions, they can email me, and if I don't know the answer, I'll email Seth and we'll get you answers.
Sure will.
So thank you. Thank you, Seth. Thank
Thank you.
everybody for coming, and more to come.
Great to see you guys. See y'all in
Great.
October.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.